Well met, Visle. We are continuing the campaign log for Ankudada, my Invisible Sun campaign, and we are in between sessions right now, so we are doing side scenes. Now, the way that Invisible Sun was constructed was very explicitly with the idea of being resilient to all of the contingencies of modern life. Players not being able to show up for a session, players wanting to do things that don't really fit within a group session, etc. And so the idea of having characters fall back into shadow is a great catch-all excuse for what happens to the person who didn't show up one session, but also a lot of things like summoning or making objects or just little threads of an idea that are meaningful for one character don't necessarily make sense to dedicate group time to. And so side sessions are encouraged, and the game is built with the idea that that these will happen. And I've run side sessions a few different ways, but the ways that these have been either via email, just via Slack, or via a simple phone call, or web meeting or something like that. So I had one of each this past week, and we're going to go into each of them. So starting with Rhea the Weaver. Rhea the Weaver, she is now living in the formerly abandoned cathedral, the old Kaleidoscope Temple, and she got a message that Aberinkula returned. Now, Aberinkula was the person that she met when she first broke into this cathedral. Aberinkula is the person who taught her about alternate magical currents. Aberinkula is the one who taught her the path-walking spell, which enabled her to travel and bring others to the night side blue and the night side green and to the blue sun. He taught her this in exchange for learning the Spider's Game, which is against her order's code. You do not teach non-weavers the Spider's Game. And the consequences for that are going to be, to be determined. Last year, in the whole first season arc, there was also a whole situation where the former treasurer of the Stamwinds Parade had tried to cut a deal with a goetic known as Asclepius. And they had paid a ton of mage coins, and Asclepius was going to not only protect the Stamwinds Parade from their former gerent, the Angel of Camden, but also from the mobster Maxwell, who they had been paying for protection. All would have been well, except Asclepius then disappeared. And what Marweg ended up discovering was that Asclepius had actually been stripped of title and name by the Goetic Order for high crimes against other Visle. Something about enslaving Visle, etc. The being known as Aberinkula is formerly known as Asclepius, and had already left town when this was learned. And so this is the first opportunity that Rhea has had a chance to put those two pieces together and interact with Asclepius. So, we went into this kind of asking, well, what's going to happen with this? Aberinkula shows up, messages her and basically asks about coming by the cathedral. Notice that it was locked now, that it was occupied, and just wanted to not just barge in, but said that I've left some things here, want to pick them up. I also have some friends that I've brought back to Saturnine with me. I'd like you to meet them. So she says, well, let's hold off on meeting the new people and, come on by and pick things up. So he does, and goes up to the mezzanine level of the cathedral, steps through a window, and there's apparently like a pantry-sized storage area, pocket dimension, through this window. Rhea comes in there. Aberinkula, takes all the stuff, kind of packs it away, is ready to move it. There's a strange orb there, which apparently had predated his occupancy, and he basically says, look, do with that what you will. She notices that there's a little bit of a seam on the orb. It's about the size of a bowling ball, and it's just sitting there. So she'll check back on that later. But she decides to accompany Aberinkula on his way to his new place, he's staying with a friend of his, Yakuto, who he brought back. Yakuto is the Vance who they learned about in the previous session's Obverse Herald headline. And Ward knew a little bit about Yakuto, and he's gonna come up more. We have some fun things coming there. So Yakuto and Metatron are going to be the people that Aberinkula is now staying with. So they're walking past, and the conversation never really quite lands on any direct confrontation here. They offer to meet back at the coffee shop and actually have a little bit more of a sit down and let him introduce his friends. But other than that, as they're exiting the cathedral, Aberinkula makes a comment about a strange sigil that seems to be, graffiti on the cathedral, and it looks sort of there's a circle, and then there's a little bit of a cross with like a zigzag below the cross, and it's just it's covering the westward wall, but Rhea hadn't seen it before until it was kind of pointed out to her. Aberinkula asks a bit about her travels, and she asks if he's ever seen some of the strange beasts like the Cheshire Cat type thing that they encountered in Nightside Green, and he just kind of comments that he tries to avoid it. And then the other main thing that kind of touches on, so one of the ideas that I had with Yakuto, I'm mashing together a few different tropes with him, but in particular, Black Bolt from the Inhumans. And I love the fact that Black Bolt is such a powerful being and a leader, but can't use his power. It's too powerful. And so Aberinkula hints at that his friend is a Vance, and he says, imagine catching an arrow in flight or holding a word on your tongue. Now imagine catching someone else's incantation and just holding it gently with gossamer threads. And then he says, my dear friend Yakuto has caught something much stronger even than that, and we've managed to bring it here. But my tongue is loose. Kind of leaves it at that. Basically, the gist of this is that Yakuto has caught an incantation midway, basically, and is just holding it. It's resting on his tongue. And so he's got effectively a vow of silence, because the moment he opens his mouth, this incantation will resolve. And I don't know what it is yet, but I know it's level 17, which is the highest that these things can go. And so this is going to be the equivalent of like someone walking in with like a nuclear grade with a pin out. It's going to really distort some of the power dynamics in Saturnine, and that's really the intent with this. So anyway, they've got that stuff sorted out, and that's basically where we left things. The other main thing that really came out of this side session was setting her up with that bowling ball in that little hidden nook, because Lumina had taken on the character arc of Vengeance, and I was talking with the player behind it, and she was saying that maybe we don't have the trigger for what that Vengeance arc is yet. Maybe something is discovered that triggers that character arc. And so then that matched it up with, there was an outstanding mission from Mara, the Warden of the Blue Sun, where Mara had told Rhea to find a forgotten thought and return it to its owner. That orb is going to be the forgotten thought, and Lumina is going to be the owner. And basically, this is going to be some traumatic event that will drive Lumina's Vengeance arc. So I'm working with Lumina to figure out what precisely that event is, but we'll likely be revealing that in the next group session. So that's the Aberinkula returns. Marweg. So Marweg Marweg's player and I exchanged emails back and forth. We talked a little bit, figuring out how much time he would have. He has the Aid a Friend character arc and wants to help Ward return to the realm of the living, figure out a body, etc. So part of what Marweg's really doing has been research and figuring out, sorry about all the creaking upstairs, trying to figure out what kind of options there are for returning Ward to his body. So this here, I pulled some various cards from the Soothe deck. Pale Magic is currently enhanced, which was helpful. But not quite as helpful as he'd hoped, and especially because the resulting cards that I drew, like Questing Knight and the Swan, it was all good fortune, but they also gave negative penalties to action. So it was painstaking research, and he found some useful things. And I basically gave him a list of some spells and things like that. So I have Anabiosis, where you cast it for yourself, and you would return to life immediately upon dying. Cool spell, not useful for this purpose. Palingenesis, where you return something to life, but you have to have a relatively intact body. They don't have that. There's a ritual, Return to the Living, that requires 5 participants and a bunch of other things to put together, but that seems promising. It'll take some work. And basically what I ruled with this was, you learn that these are things that are possible spells or rituals. You would have to take the time and the acumen to learn the ones that you want to pursue. And so he's going to talk to Ward and figure out which direction do they want to go with all this. Which brings us to Ward. So Ward has been, after getting betrayed by Cedric, his former Maker advisor, Cedric took his work and passed it off as his own, and that set Ward back a little bit on his progression through the Maker Order. He's now working with Vess, who is also a ghost, who is a Maker, who lives in a house with Morgan and Vincent and the Undersling. And they began working towards Ward's 3rd degree. And this is, we love puns in this game. And so I had a little note of 3rd degree burns. I'm like, we're going to do something with fire with this. So they create a little forge. They're going to make a ring that offers a bonus die to resistance rolls. So it's going to be an object of power, a 0 to 4 depletion. And because Ward's a ghost, what they're going to do is they're basically going to craft the ring out of lumber, luster stone, and then convert it to an etheric ring. So you're going to create the ring and then you convert the ring. But of course, they create the ring successfully, but cause a fire due to some of the mishap rolls in the creation process. And it actually gets significant because you have 2 ghosts that are trying to put out a fire. That doesn't work very well. Morgan comes in and tries to help. Morgan's clothes catch fire, and they start actually having a lot of issues, and their partner Vincent is able to come down and help them, but not before they actually get seriously burned, and causes some despair, causes some problems. But Morgan is ultimately okay. Vincent has his demons kind of put out the fire, and they end up with a successful ring, which then is included in the log with the invocation of not knowledge for advancement to 3rd degree. And the way I described it for Makers is that the Goetics and the Vances are very much about ceremony and very much about doing things correctly and ticking all the right boxes. And Weavers are a bit more cliquish, but Makers are very down to earth and practical. And really what you're looking for is not even so much they want to see your logs complete, successes, failures. How did you rectify the failures? How did you respond to it? So they do all that stuff. You basically have like a portfolio of sorts. And that was our side scene with Ward. And the other thing that we did with Ward is he had a bunch of acumen to spend. And so we saw the spell, is it Consignment, I think? but it requires the designated place ritual enchantment. So we spent the acumen on the designated place enchantment, and then made the note of he's going to work towards the consignment. He also was able to advance in his forte, and since he's got the Herald's Plagues forte, it's going to be the material corruption. So, causing things to weaken or crumble to dust, which feels very fitting. Finally, we had Hatta, who's the barista at Deja Brew, and Spectacles showed up unexpectedly at Hatta's place of employment. And, this was a pretty low-key situation, really just getting to know, how Hatta got into the whole distilling and mixology type things. We introduced some students from Gevra House, the fraternity that's nearby. And we also noticed that same glyph, that same sigil, showed up etched into one of the tables, the same one that was graffitied onto the cathedral. And then Hatta decides to look into it afterwards and goes over to the public portion of the library at the Vancian campus. Doesn't find actual text about it, but sees it in the negative space in one of the books, sees it rubbed into the carpet in one place, decides to, do some other digging subsequently. And we also started looking into, Hatta is also a maker, and we pulled some NPC cards for Hatta's advisor. And amusingly, we pulled the Relentless Rumor as the defining trait. We pulled the Sealed Door as the goal, and the Barrier as Unwelcome Child. And so we spitballed some ideas as to what those could mean, and the player will get back to me, and we'll resume that. So we'll be running our next session on Saturday, and I've got the title for that as Atrocity Exhibition, and I'll report back once we have that. So that is a catch up on our side sessions, and I'll close the log out here. Thank you.